This is the Western Cape of Southern Africa, a place of unprecedented diversity and undeniable beauty. There are 9,000 plant species found in the Fynbos region, and 6,000 of them are found nowhere else on the planet. The evolutionary history of many of these plants is tightly interwoven with that of their insect pollinators. Bees such as this carpenter bee are well known to be important pollinators, but they are by no means the only ones.
When most of us think about pollinators, we tend to think about bees, and we think about bees being really important, especially in agricultural settings, and we've all heard about the bee pollination crisis and things like that. But in South Africa, bees are not necessarily the be-all and end-all. Sunbirds are really important too. And in fact, a lot of flowers, of our native flowers, don't even rely on bees for pollination at all. Many of them are in fact robbed by bees, and having lots of bees can be problematic for them because they end up stealing the nectar. They also end up stealing pollen. Now, sunbirds aren't after pollen rewards at all, they're only after nectar. But it's the pollen that the plants really need to be moving around, and so having bird pollinators can be really good for plants because it means that a lot less of the pollen is wasted in terms of being eaten by bees because the birds don't groom themselves. Without those birds, those plants could possibly go locally extinct.
Of the 9,000 Fynbos plant species, hundreds are dependent solely on birds for pollination. However, a very recent problem is threatening to unravel that ancient relationship. Artificial nectar feeders. These man-made feeders are attracting birds in extraordinary numbers. And many scientists are wary of the effects such a radical shift might have on the local flora.
We really just haven't done enough research on the question. You would imagine that a big food resource like a liter of sugar water will attract birds away from plants which have smaller amounts of nectar, would perhaps change the movement patterns of birds, that they would be more localized around the feeder. You know, the other things to consider is what the effects are on the health of the birds. So normally a bird would have to work quite hard to obtain the reward from flowers, moving between plants, obtaining small amounts with every visit, compared with just sitting next to a feeder and glugging down as much sugar water as it can possibly take. And then, of course, the question of what one puts in these feeders is also an open question, you know. So there are commercial mixes available. They often include red dyes. We don't know what the effect of those dyes are on birds. Often they're food dyes that have been tested to be safe for humans, but we're not that closely related to birds. And then there are other things like probiotics, which, you know, I'm not even sure what they are putting in those mixes. So we need to look at those sorts of things. I would prefer it if people planted bird-pollinated plants in their gardens than used artificial nectar sources. The plants, you know, have many advantages besides supplying nectar to birds. They also reduce noise, bring chameleons and all kinds of insects, and, you know, are much more attractive, etc. It's much more kind of educational and inspirational to see a bird feeding from a flower than from a nectar feeder. You're seeing some kind of evolutionary fit between a bird and a flower that has evolved over millions of years. It's a much more worthwhile thing to have in your garden.
We don't know for sure if these artificial nectar feeders are having an impact on the surrounding ecosystem. But we do know that we humans are capable of serious disruption when our actions go unchecked. On the fringe where man meets nature, extra care must be taken to ensure a harmonious coexistence.